let's think for a second that what if, in order to be happy, in order to live a fulfilling life, that all we had to do was get out of the way, get out of our own way? What if that instead of being bogged down by fear, bogged down by jealousy, anger, rage, what if instead of resisting that and striving for the happiness, that we allowed ourselves to process our own feelings, emotions, situations in life effortlessly? What if there was nothing to feel guilty about? What if guilt was just a mental construct? What if shame was a mental construct? And what if all of these things created this sort of prison that we find ourselves in, that humanity finds itself in? Well, if that's the case, then the thing that would need to happen is that a light would need to be shown on these qualities, and we would have to see them for what they are. Because when we're living that way, when we're living in shame, when we're living in guilt, when we're living in anger and fear, we tend to believe that that emotion, that thought, that thing that's happening out in the world has something to do with me, right? That it's me and me alone. I'm responsible for it, or I'm victim to it, or it's only because I'm a bad person that this happens, or it's only because I'm not good enough that this is happening, or it's only because I deserve bad things that this happens. So that narration in the mind is a farce. It's not real. It's unfortunately just a product of our own evolution as a species. And when we latch onto it as if it is real, then we create that reality. We create a reality that elicits fear, that elicits the anger, and elicits guilt and shame. So it's a sense of identification with ourselves and with our own ego, our own separate self, that is the source of all pain and suffering in the world, essentially. What we can do about that is really a lot. And these truths or these things that we can do are very simple, but they're not easy to do. They're not easy to implement in our lives until we are ready to change, until we are ready to implement them, or until in some way our hand is forced to change. So I want you to ask yourself a question. Who would I be if I wasn't all of the things that I achieved? Who would I be if I wasn't my relationships? Who would I be if I wasn't my successes or my failures? Who would I be if I didn't have my left arm? Who would I be if I wasn't a musician? Ask yourself these questions about who would I be if I wasn't blank, attached to whatever you are attached to in your life. If I wasn't a rapper, right? If I wasn't a therapist. You ask yourself these questions, and what you find is that the mind tries to fill in the blank. The mind will say, okay, well, I am this, or I am this positive quality, or I'm this negative quality. Okay, but what are you if you're not that? You can observe that, right? You can see that you're a good person or a bad person. You can see that you have these successes in life. You can see that you own this business, right? It's observable. You can see that you're in a body, okay? But what's beyond that? Ask yourself, who am I? What am I? Before all of that, before you start identifying with these things that appear on the surface of consciousness. Because what I think has happened is that these emotions, these thoughts, these identities, these careers, they appear on the ocean of consciousness on the surface, and we attach ourselves to that. And maybe at the time it's the right thing to do, and maybe at the time it works. But then as we grow and evolve, the stories may continue to be the same, but we have changed. And so those stories no longer work. Our feet have grown too big. The shoes that we had on don't fit anymore. So what do we do? Well, we got to buy a bigger pair of shoes. We have to encompass this new sense of self in our being. We have to recognize that who we are, what we are, is prior to all of these identifications. When we do this, a very interesting thing happens where, as if how Jesus says to wear the world as a loose garment. Well, what happens is that you begin to wear yourself, or what you believe yourself is, as a loose garment. You begin to take yourself a lot less seriously. You begin to look at your own humanness with compassion. You begin to look at others' humanness with compassion. It's not a competition anymore. It's not a I'm much better or you're much worse situation anymore. It's not narcissism. It's not people pleasing anymore. It becomes communion. It becomes an actual communion with life. And that is what I think we as human beings are called to do, is to rid ourselves of this separate sense of self, to see through it, to not say it's bad, not say it's evil, but to wear it as if it's a loose garment, and to see our humanness as merely a manifestation of something bigger. So, in my life, I have strived to be someone that understands this, because of events that have happened in my life that have enlightened me to the reality that this is actually the way. That the way to live life is with heart and without ego, or at least without identification with the ego in a strict way. I have found inner peace, and it is only as a result of walking this path and trial and error and seeing what works and what doesn't work, and being able to zoom out and to see the big picture, okay? We have something that happens in our lives. Let's say you get in a fight with your spouse or loved one, and when you're more constricted and more identified with your ego and your separate sense of self, then what might happen is you might take the fight personally. You might try to find ways to exact revenge. You might try to prove your worth. You might try to say something to get under the other person's skin, okay? And when you're not in that way, when you're coming from a perspective of love and connection, you might notice that those qualities are available to you, but they're not the option that you want to choose. That you want to choose presence, and you want to choose listening and being available and being accountable to life. So the fight might not even happen, or if it does, it might be a springboard for growth in the relationship. It's so valid and important to question who and what you are and what you think that you are. If you don't do that, I think that's what's called living an unexamined life. And that's what psychiatrists, psychologists have considered to be possibly one of the biggest faults of humans, is to live an unexamined life. Some of the great spiritual leaders of religions talk about how ignorance is really the greatest sin of all. It's not knowing. And that's what a video like this or any of the other videos that you see on YouTube are about, I think, is that it's about bringing awareness to what's actually real and what's not. It becomes so clear what's real when you live from this perspective. Yet, everyone has their own script, everyone has their own story, everyone has their own life that they have to work through. And things may continue to come up, things may change. You might have new hurdles, new responsibilities in life. But the fact remains the same, that there is something here right now that has been here for a long time. Ever since you can remember being alive on this earth, it has been there. And what is that? You call it you, okay? It's me. Okay, but what is me? Am I my career? Am I my family? Am I my friends? Am I this physical body? Am I how I look? Am I what I think about? Am I my actions? Am I how I treat other people? It's a good practice to ask yourself, who and what am I? What you might find is that you don't know. I remember one time I learned this meditation technique, and it was as if I kept asking that question, who am I, who am I, who am I? And it was like I was in the movie, right? The movie of life. And then I stepped back and I could see the character. I could see the back of my head, and I could see that the character was acting in life, and I was a witness to that. And then I kept asking, and I said, and what is it that's behind that? And when I got to a point, it was like so vast and so overwhelming that I really didn't know. But it was peaceful and it was powerful. practice like this will help you to understand what your role is in the world and what your role is in your relationships with people, what you take on and what you don't. It's like the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. What is the difference between the things you can change and the things that you can't? And if you can't change another person, even though you might want to, then what can you do? Well, you have a smorgasbord of options of how you relate to the world around you. What I've found to be the most powerful is to approach it with a sense of love and compassion. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about general positive welfare for all. What is the highest and most good thing here? What is the most appropriate thing here? How can I be available to somebody? How can I listen to somebody? So then if you take that, flip it around and invert it on yourself, where now it's how can I listen to myself? How can I be loving to myself? How can I be available to myself? Then the magic starts happening and you start to embody the higher awareness, for lack of better words, into your life and see life differently. You could have the exact same life as before, but you see it differently. You could still have only a couple $1,000s in the bank. But prior to this awakening, you'd think, oh man, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm never going to have enough. How am I going to afford the bills? How am I going to be able to do this? How am I going to be able to do that? Versus, wow, I have $2,000 in the bank. This is a good place to start. I can do a lot with $2,000. I'm grateful that I have the ability to work. I'm grateful that I have the ability to be available to people. I'm grateful that I can give back. Can you give back from that perspective? What kind of effect does that have? So I'm just spitballing here. I don't even know what I'm talking about. I didn't have an agenda for this conversation, but I wonder if what we're meant to do and what we're meant to be in this world is more correlated with our essence as who and what we are deep down versus our emotions, our thoughts, what we think we are, the roles that we take on in society. I wonder if we can find our purpose and meaning in the who and what I am. And if that is what brings meaning to life versus achieving something outside. Yeah, I think it does. Well, thanks for listening and talk at you later. Peace out.